Hello there. Okay, my name is Natty, and my channel, I don't have a lot of content on here, so this is probably one of the only videos you'll see of me. But I really felt the need to talk about this, and here we go. I've managed to find something that has a screen where I can show the article I'm talking about. So between 2015 and 2020-21, I was involved in the men's rights movement in the UK. And I helped organise an event called Messages for Men with a bunch of other people who were involved in men's rights. And I created a Twitter account called Ladies for Philip Davies because we did an interview with Philip Davies with a group of other women who were sympathetic to men's rights or men's rights activists or inherently anti-feminist, which you can find on my Twitter account, etc. Right. The article I want to talk about today is by a blogger called Miri AF. And I think she is fine with me using this, but definitely will get her permission. And mainly because I sort of agree with most of what she has to say, so I'm sure she's fine with it. Anyway, it's called The Transformation of Family Life. You can see the picture. For those of you who do know what this picture is from, you might have an idea of what she's going to talk about already. All right, let's go. I'm going to read some parts of it and then respond, and you'll find out more about me and why I want to do this video as it goes on. Okay. Reminder to young men, do not marry. The laws governing marriage can destroy your life. There is no way to ensure your spouse won't use the laws to take your kids. Use adoption or surrogacy. And if you want children, sorry. So said a prominent conservative influencer on Twitter recently. This was shortly following his declaration that women should not become single parents because single mothers inevitably destroy children, whereas single fathers do a stellar job. So I replied to this man. And how does this square for the future of your daughters? They can't expect to marry a man since men should stay single, yet can't become a single parent themselves because they'll ruin their kids? The influencer replied, they should devote themselves to reforming the laws until it's a good deal for men. So that's where I want to stop and respond. So as a men's rights activist in the UK, I accepted that this was something that women should do. I accepted that as a men's rights activist and someone who was anti-feminist, I did not agree with a lot of the government policies and the family court and divorce policies that were unfair to men and discriminatory towards men, and also were destroying the family unit overall and alienating women and making them seem to be this horrible group of misandrous harpies who didn't care about men and only wanted certain privileges that the government gives them. Clearly, some people are like that. But not all women, as we know. Not all women. Okay. And I accepted that we have a gynocentric privilege and the government has our ear. Sorry, we have the government's ear. And that we should do our best to lobby and fight on behalf of men and set things back and make things more equitable between men and women, legally speaking, and also speak out in the mainstream culture and push back against the narratives of that that masculinity is toxic, and that we should fight the patriarchy, whatever that is defined as these days. And I did accept that for a while, which is part of the reason I got involved. However, I soon became quite demoralised and disgruntled. And I just sort of started to question the notion of democracy itself. I now believe that we live in a post-democratic society and that we have lots of a thin veneer of democracy, and that most of our social movements of the past and the present, if they are organically and grassroots created, they get infiltrated by the government and some other interested parties at some point. And so the democratic process is never truly not corrupted. And also the government engages in long-term projects to manufacture consent from the populace. As you know, most people don't vote, actually. The voting percentages are not that high, depending on, I mean, Brexit had quite a large percentage, probably one of the largest ever. But overall, when we have voting, it's quite low compared to, what is it, 40% of the population, or depends. But it's never the majority, actually. And even so, there are extremely intelligent mass formation projects that are used to manufacture consent in the populace, and the government and its sponsors lie to us and manipulate statistics on a routine basis. And there's so many examples that I'm not going to go into them. If you don't agree with that, okay, but this video is sort of aimed at people, I suppose, who are at least aware of this argument and have some acceptance of it, even if they don't agree with it entirely. I agree with it entirely. So this idea that a large group of women were just going to get the government to do what they wanted, I soon learned, and well, my suspicions were already there, but I soon learned that it just wasn't really a worthy goal, because it's just not how things work. And so within the men's rights community and the manosphere overall, I then had to start questioning whether or not they really are operating from what reality is telling them, the reality of the system. And just concentrating on the percentage of women who are immoral and unethical and essentially, well, let me save that point. I'm going to keep reading the article. So she goes on to say, so have you got that, ladies? No relationships for or kids for you. Instead of your sole social options are become legal experts who devote your entire life to supporting men, or you're not permitted to have relationships or families with, or become a rent-a-womb surrogates so single men can become fathers. Now, critics may reasonably object. Oh, come on, there's just one guy. Nobody else thinks like that. It's not like this in some major social movement or anything. To which I would say, oh, really? Let's look a bit deeper. First of all, let's identify the conservative influencer quoted above. His name is Jeff Younger. His story is objectively horrific, and in his particular case, it's hard not to see why and how he arrived at his current views. Mr. Younger married a little later in life, and he and his wife weren't able to start a family, so they used the services of an egg donor, with the pregnancy fathered by Younger and carried by his wife. She gave birth to twin boys. Not long afterwards, the marriage broke down, and her estranged husband, the 5-year-old, it was at this point that she informed her estranged husband that a 5-year-old James, one of the twin boys, was now a girl named Luna. She insisted that James's elementary school refer to him this way and began sending him to school in dresses. So a lot of people who are, especially in the conservative side of things, will know about this horrific story. So the husband took the whole thing to court, and the court agreed with the ex-wife, and said that she can transition the child against his wishes, which is horrible. So I think we can certainly all entirely understand why Younger is angry at the system that has allowed for this situation to develop, and we can understand why men are angry, why many men are angry. And I am sadly also familiar with the brutal laws that can see innocent men and loving fathers ripped out of their children's lives for good, and I have supported several male friends who have gone through such things, and then she recommends a book. Now, as someone who's also supported lots of men and spoken to lots of men who've gone through this type of ripping away of their children via family court, and women using family court as a weapon against them, clearly I know a lot about this. and I can see why it would make them turn to a more extreme position. Yet to imagine the solution is to cut off women out of family life altogether is obviously absurd. And it's just as bad as the extremist feminists who use the abusive behaviour of a minority of men to judge and penalise all males. That's right. She says that this position where you start telling men that they need to use a surrogate instead of getting married is just as bad as the radicals and the feminists. And I agree. And this is so hard for me to say because I spent a lot of time on the internet arguing with feminists and left-wingers as admin of Facebook groups and such. And I stuck up for this viewpoint from like MGTOWs and some of the more radical MRM types and in the red pill manosphere. I stuck up for them. I said, look, how can they not go to this point of view when you guys are supporting this system? Now, I believe that there have been some bad agents, bad actors even from the beginning within the MGTOW and MRN sphere who did not start out with a kind of an approach where they wanted a peaceful collaborative solution about things with women. I actually have this viewpoint now that some of them were there to deliberately stir the pot, and that they have a transhumanist view of nature, of human nature, and that they saw the men's rights movement as a way to promote this and make it more palatable. And I will come back to this later. So she goes on to say, but not just absurd though, but sinister too, because there is far more support for this particular reproductive model than one might imagine. Elon Musk, currently one of the world's most famous and talked about men, has fathered a total of 10 children with 4 different women, and he is not in a relationship with any of these women. And he has used surrogates, and they were conceived by IVF. So he has 9 living children with 4 different women. And this exact same model has been replicated by another very famous, widely talked about man, Mr. Andrew Tate. I'm not ready to get any attention about Andrew Tate, but we have to talk about him. He has fathered at least 10 children, according to him, with multiple different women, and he's not married to any of them. And if we look more closely into Mr. Tate's predilections in this general area, and here we go, this is where it starts to get more spicy, we see that he is a vigorous supporter of trans women, openly suggesting that hot trans women are far preferable to sexual partners to ugly biological women. Here is Tate instructing his followers that opting for an ugly biological woman over a hot woman is gay. What? How can... That doesn't make any logical sense. But anyway. Tate makes sure to really emphasize the point that in effect men often make better women than women do. Now, I've heard this argument numerous times from other people, not Andrew Tate, online. They have said maybe, this trans thing's good because they'll make better women than women do. And I know that it's been said in jest or as a joke by a lot of people, but I have seen a few times the types that have said it and been a little bit disturbed by them, I have to say, because they're either someone who was a transhumanist already, and so they have no problem with this type of argument, or they got so bitter and disgruntled by everything that's going on with men that they have been pushed past any moral values and ethics and said, okay, let's be pragmatists about this. And maybe this is a good thing, right? I do know some people who probably would say, actually, yes, I sort of agree with this, or they'll accept it when it's presented as the norm. He emphasizes this point, and he says they can look so much hotter with the right cosmetic surgery. He then asks his followers to imagine a trans woman who looks like Megan Fox, which means we must ask ourselves, out of all the hot women out there, why has he picked this particular one as an illustrative example? It's because Megan Fox is a trans woman, as she herself has confirmed. Now, this is the point in the article where I'm not sure I am 100% in agreement with Miri, but I have an open mind. So if more evidence comes out that a lot of the elite class, the celebrities that they use and are trannies, I wouldn't be surprised because it would make a lot of sense. But I'm not. I just want everyone to know I'm not 100% sure if this is correct. So let's be clear. There's a specific family model being pushed covertly or explicitly by the above three very prominent people: Jeff Younger, Elon Musk, and Andrew Tate. And the model is this men should have purely transactional relationships with women, renting their reproductive faculties to produce children, but for relationships and sex, men should look to trans women instead, who are not only hotter than real women. They won't lose their figure during pregnancy, etc., etc. They won't divorce or rape you by stealing your children, because your children are not their children. Your children have been produced as a business arrangement with a woman you are not in a relationship with. Plus, a trans woman can't cheat on you, get pregnant, and pass the baby off as yours, since she isn't an actual biological woman. And if you think this sounds fantastical and obscene and the stuff of particular dystopian science fiction, well, you're right. But it's also nothing new and represents the reproductive model the elites have been using for hundreds, if not thousands of years. As I've detailed before, it's been common practice in wealthy, socially ambitious families to bring up some of their sons as castratos. These are boys who have been castrated as children, so they never go through male puberty and can, as a result, be convincingly passed off as women in adulthood. Now, with all our advances in hormone treatments and surgery, it's much easier for them. The social benefits of bringing up sons this way is that they can be offered up as public-facing wives to the elite who don't believe in conventional family arrangements. And many ruling class dynasties believe, just as the ancient Greeks did, that women are for duties and boys are for fun. And that is to say, women are used merely as incubators to fulfill one's duty to sire the next generation, whereas recreational sex is reserved for other males. Ooh, just need to adjust myself. Well, you will note that there are relentless questions over the true genders of spouse of powerful men, Michelle Obama, for example. And this is because many of these wives are indeed males. And whilst any children appearing to be conceived by the union may have been acquired through some form of surrogacy, like the Queen Mother. So that's how things have been for the elites for 100 years, and bearing in fact in mind, here's a question for all diligent consumers of modern popular culture and society, where women are enslaved as reproductive assets, rented wombs with no real rights, and are just there to produce offspring for moneyed men. What does that remind you of? Does it remind you of anything? Handmaid's Tale, anyone? So, Handmaid's Tale, if you don't know what it is, it's a TV show and a book that was written by a feminist that's been around a while. And the TV show is feminist cringe. I couldn't watch all of it. The book is much better than the TV show. And the reason the show has risen to such prolific prominence, Marie goes on to say, churning out series after series with the production of perennial talking point at all office water coolers everywhere, is because it's intended as powerful predictive programming. And that's where all big budget star-studded productions are. I sort of agree with this too, that the majority of Hollywood and TV shows are predictive programming, are there to mold us and manufacture consent. Especially when they're enduring and successful as the Handmaid's Tale is. So consider this. What if there is a covert encoded message in the Handmaid's Tale that the real reason the wealthy wives of the commanders in the Handmaid's Tale can't have children is not that they're infertile women, it's that they're castrated men. Hence the families enslave fertile lower class women to reproduce for them, just as the ruling elites have covertly been doing for centuries. It's just now we're being prepped for it going more mainstream. Now, that is a very interesting argument. If that is true, my gosh, wow. Just wow. I mean, I'm sure that some of you who follow the culture wars or whatever know that when Roe v. Wade was, the courts looked at Roe v. Wade and said that that wasn't the right decision recently, that all the feminists came out in their Handmaid's Tale outfits and protested. And whenever there's any talk about abortion being restricted or whatever, they lose their mind and get hysterical and do these protests in Handmaid's Tale outfits. And it's kind of hilarious. But at the same time, I was thinking, maybe there's some truth underneath this, because in my view, whenever they come out with such a unified viewpoint as feminists, there's been some money pushed into it, and usually it's one of their funders, one of the elites, who said this is a narrative you should go with, and the reason they're promoting it is because they want it to be in the public sphere. They want it to be an idea that we all can consider. And even though those of us on the right or who are not feminists and not progressive, I don't really class myself as left or right anymore, but let's just frame it that way for now. They know that this is something that they want in our public consciousness, and so this is why they came out in all this silly gear, dressed up as a handmaiden, right? There's some truth to it. Just going to leave it there. Note that our society, just as is reflected in Handmaid's Tale, another predictive programming vehicle, Children of Men, that's another good example, is hurtling headlong into a future where many women are infertile. Ever since the government's new medicine was rolled out, new medicine is a code word for something that happened in the last 2 to 3 years. I'm not going to say what it is, but I think we all know what that could be. Ever since the government's new medicine was rolled out, fertility has inexplicably plummeted in all heavily injected countries, with miscarriages, stillbirths, and neonatal deaths way up. This mirrors the Handmaid's Tale exactly, where it's not just conceiving that women have a problem with, but having a healthy live birth. Hence, women who can achieve this in the near-barren dystopia of Gilead, which is the place in the book and this TV show, are in high demand. Conversely, in our current culture, as the cost of living crisis intensifies and AI gallops forward at an unnerving pace, women are in less and less demand everywhere else, as white-collar sectors that mainly employ women are disproportionately disadvantaged by advances in AI. This is a very good point. There's a lot of paper pushing, busy work, PR, communications-based roles that are held by women, right? And they are adversely affected by incoming AI. A lot of those women are going to be at home thinking, what do I need to do as a job now? Now, I'm more trad, yeah? I'm not egalitarian, I'm trad. So I want them at home with their husbands, having babies, and influencing their local community. Now, but I want them to do this in an organic way. I want them to find Christ, right? And I want them to do this because they have voluntarily accepted this is the best thing, and that God loves women, loves humanity, and that God created them to do this because it's so beneficial to our societies and the family unit. And they have immense power when they are doing that as their sole primary focus. But I also recognize that throughout history, women have always worked. Staying at home and looking after and home educating kids with multiple kids is work. But also, women have always had family businesses that they helped run with their husbands. They worked on the fields in the local village. Then when the Industrial Revolution came along, they worked in the factories. This idea that women didn't work before the 1950s or whatever is not true. It's just because The elite class were like that, and they like to project what they do onto everyone else. And that's what feminism came from, an elite class, and was manufactured to make it seem like that's what all women had. It's not true. It's never been true. Most women, and there's loads of surveys that I can find, and studies that I can use to demonstrate this. And I don't even like to use studies to win arguments, but I can make more pragmatic arguments with evidence, empirical evidence. I can do both. But anyway, women generally want to prioritize their family and their relationships and their children. And they also want an outlet for their creative impulses, or have a level of independence. I don't want to call it independence, but they want something for themselves, or at least a way to not just be solely under their husband. Now, I think they should be under their husband, but they can be under their husband and have this. So that is the part of the argument that I will agree with, certain more extremist types about. But I would never promote that as something we have to enforce. It needs to be voluntary. Yeah. It needs to be something that, without all the governmental propaganda that we get in schools and in the media, if women had viewpoints on both sides, my opinion is that most women would choose to stay home most of the time, and they may have some kind of part-time income, or they will work for their husbands. Hopefully the husbands will have their own business or something like that. Or they will go out into the local community and provide a service to the local community. It won't be for some horrible conglomerate corporation that just takes. I think that is what probably would happen, because I think that inherently, by default, our human nature is more case-selected and more conservative, and that we actually have to be propagandized to be more liberal. It's just that we've had a luxurious, convenient life in the last 50 years or more in the West. And so people can afford to be more, promiscuous and spontaneous and hedonistic and liberal. Men included. Yeah, because men went along with this too. And so when men are complaining about it as well, it's like, oh, all modern women are like this and all modern women are like that. Well, you're a modern man. So why would you expect a woman to be more traditional if you're a modern man? Then they try to say that they're trapped. But if you read like Jeff Younger's Twitter, for example, he says he's a, hang on, let's just bring it up. Can't believe this is how he describes himself. Come on, screen. He says, I'm a paleo-futurist, counter-enlightenment. This means he's been reading too much of Curtis Yarvin's NRX blog and The Dark Enlightenment by that other guy whose name I forget right now. Or maybe some Nick Fuentes, futurist tradcath. What? Basically, he's like saying that he is pro-transhumanism, right? Sort of. Because that's what futurist means, dude. But just not the way that his ex-wife is doing, whatever. The guy that she was referencing, who has the poor situation with the twins. So let's go back to where I was in the article before I lose track. Okay, so finishing my tangent. If for you to accept my argument and Miri's argument, because I sort of came up with this on my own, and then when I saw her writing about it, I was like, oh wow, someone who does this all the time is also thinking this. Maybe there's something to it. Maybe I'm not just being contrarian, right? You have to accept that the majority of the population is becoming more infertile, and also that most women don't really want what's coming, and they haven't really consented to most of it either. That's not to say they haven't taken advantage of it, But men have taken advantage of the modern world too, but just in a different way. Now, the men's rights movement probably will, or at least people in the manosphere will have argued that a lot of men will have been trying to, because they take their provider role is inherent within them. When they accepted capitalism as the dominant economic system, etc., they were doing it for everyone's benefit. But I think they had some blind spots. I am not pro-capitalism or socialism. I am neither. Just can put it that way, right? So, loads of women are losing their jobs because they're going to be adversely affected by AI, and loads of men too. But there's still going to be lots of worker bee men around because men hold up the infrastructure. Even when AI takes over a bit more, it's going to affect women quite disproportionately in a certain way. That's what she's saying. Okay, so what are these women who, they don't have husbands who earn good money? So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to have a commodity, which is part of the reason why OnlyFans has become as prevalent as it is, even though it's still only like 1% of the population that are doing it. But anyway, it's still promoted in the manosphere, and all young women are on OnlyFans. No, actually, most young women are not on OnlyFans. You just think of that because you spend too much time on the internet and it's warped your view of women, just like feminism warped women's view of men. So there, a lot of women will probably go to surrogacy. Very high possibility there, I'd say, especially if there's loads of trannies wanting to have kids and gays. I should not use the word tranny. I'll probably get deleted off the internet, but whatever. I won't do it again. This, unfortunately, is not as implausible as it might seem. Now, Mary Harrington, look her up. She has written about this and warned about this in a recent book, Feminism Against Progress. The description of her book reads, "This is a stark warning against a dystopian future whereby poor women become little more than convenient sources of body parts to be harvested and wombs to be rented by the rich. As a cultural winds shift rapidly, women's social roles are transforming at an extremely accelerated pace, and such we must keep a close eye on so-called influences and the social seeds they are sowing in terms of what women should expect going forward." Now, if you didn't know, in Handmaid's Tale, there is a woman who promotes a new form of feminism called domestic feminism. And Miri is saying that Mary Harrington and Louise Perry are promoting the real-life version of that. I follow on Twitter an interesting character called Layla Hailpern, where she has over 500,000 followers, and this glamorous young lady is a friend to the stars, regularly chatting with Andrew Tate and even Piers Morgan, and frequently exposes her traditional views to her audience. Yeah, she's not traditional in my mind. But anyway, married women shouldn't be going to the club, she declares. Predictably, this declaration got a lot of support from people who consider themselves traditional. Yeah, I mean, I am more traditional in my viewpoint now. I don't think married women should be going to the club. If you're not looking for a partner to be promiscuous with, then you shouldn't be going to the club. Now, however, whilst I might make an argument about what one should do, right? I'm never going to say, let's ban married women going to the club, because I still have that libertarian streak in me. And also, as a Christian, I believe we have free will. Once you accept Christ as your savior, then you are saying, I'm going to use my free will that God has given me to be a good person and to do what's best. And that means you have an informed decision about everything you do, and that you are using your logic and moving away and reason and moving away from just giving into base impulses and becoming sinful. Christianity is inherently supposed to be voluntary, not supposed to be enforced by the sword. Those Roman Catholics who did that in the Crusades, that was bad. Right. They know that anyway. So, I was branded a feminist extremist for challenging it, pointing out that restricting women from public places is based on the marital status sounds remarkably Taliban-esque. Now, what's really funny is when the Taliban started talking on social media recently, a couple of years or two ago, the sort of right-leaning young men sphere, on the internet, started saying, you know what, maybe we should start copying the Taliban because the Taliban have fought back against the CIA in America, blah, 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 which was a very interesting paradoxical point that came out. It was fascinating to observe because the Taliban seemed to be fighting against the use of young boys, as I said, for fun. But they also seem to be very, very restrictive against women. So again, you're being presented with two sides that are both wrong for different reasons. To illustrate my point, I invited Halpern and her disciples. No, sorry, that doesn't say disciples. It says disciplines to follow this declaration that married women should go to clubs through to its logical conclusion. After all, why would one suggest that married women shouldn't go to a club, but single ones can? The insinuation is obviously that married women might be tempted to cheat. But most affairs happen at work. Okay. Why is it such a cliche for spouses to run off with secretaries? Because the workplace presents the right conditions for an affair to develop. Seeing the same person day in and out, where attention and romance can escalate over time, one night in the club doesn't offer this. It depends how drunk and how horny you are, and how much you don't care about your trying to be a good person. Not 100% sure I agree with Miri there, but I see where she's going. Overall, I agree with where she's going with it. So if she's saying that the promotion of this type of thinking is leading into a cultural narrative that we're going to have coming via Andrew Tate and other people. So she's saying that we're going to become more like the Taliban. People may have thought I was being hyperbolic. And because this woman's a big fan of Andrew Tate, who's a fundamentalist Muslim who stated that ISIS are the real Muslims. Really, dude? Oh, man. He's just so subtle in his subversion. I just can't understand why people can't see it. Anyway. He also promotes polygamy. Then she said that Miss Halpern said that Instagram is a dating app. And if you're not using it for business, you should delete it. Funny that, because like Instagram is one of the places that loads of home education and home school moms like to promote stuff to each other. They are not on Instagram to try and find men. This woman clearly hasn't got a clue how a lot of social media is used in the sphere of traditional women who value their family. But anyway, so I will go on. I'm losing a bit of steam. Let me have some water. Right. Miri says, she's baiting you. Halpern is baiting you with seemingly reasonable sounding rhetoric. She's saying that it will eventually lead to men telling women that they should cut off from all social leisure opportunities upon marriage and completely controlled by your husband. And I have to say, as someone who follows the manosphere content on YouTube and whatever, I have seen lots of people in the trad circles as well saying, once you're married, you shouldn't be on social media. And I'm like, I know, look, again, I'll mention this again. I am on social media with all these homeschool, home education mums, right? And lots of homemaker types, and they all use it to help other women. So I don't think that a traditionally minded husband would tell his wife he's not allowed to do that if that's helping to improve her life and getting camaraderie with other women. So this woman's not traditional. She doesn't know that this world exists. It does, and it's huge. Anyway, please note again how the Handmaids Tale evolved. Serena Joy, so who is the sort of one of the women in protagonists in the show, wasn't always an ultra-oppressed house prisoner, not even allowed to read a book. On the contrary, prior to the formation of Gilead, she actually wrote them and taught the nation's colleges, promoting the benefits of traditional values and domestic feminism. Serena Joy was a big influencer of her day, and she wasn't just being reasonable, simply objecting to the destructive excess of fourth wave feminism and calling for a return to something less extreme. No, she wasn't. That's what she said to hook an audience and gain their support. Once her cool young conservative influencer veneer had done its job, the mask slipped and the truth was revealed. We have several Serena Joys right now. So we have Layla Halpern, Louise, that we just mentioned, Louise Perry, who's written a book, which is also, she's a feminist who's also against more liberal progressive feminism, and Mary Harrington. You may not know these names yet, but you soon will, because they're spearheading a prodigious social cultural revolution, just like Andrew Tate and Elon Musk. And such revolution strategized and coordinated by the elites. It's not one that's going to be in our interests. So they are using certain ideas that I agree with to get our attention and manufacture consent. We must be very careful, eternally vigilant as always, as much of what these people say, especially the more scholarly ones. They sound reasonable. We may be inclined to agree with much of it. And she says, I do agree with a lot of what Perry says. But we can never take the messages of highly publicized social change agents at face value because they're highly publicized. That's exactly. If they're highly publicized, like Mr. Peterson, for example, out of nowhere, seemingly out of nowhere, in an accelerated way, Andrew Tate too, you should always be vigilant. Always. Okay. They are wolves in sheep's clothing. Trojan horses. Yep, good. She keeps hammering the point home. Please be clear that all the current discord between men and women, between liberals and conservatives, have been meticulously manipulated over decades by the ruling classes. I agree. And they are the ones who brought into place family devastating policies to ensure merry marriages would fall apart, and many parents would be alienated from children. It's all planned for obvious reasons to destroy the family, as the subversive social forces have always aimed to do, and turn human beings into commodities and relationships into transactions. That's what they want, and seeing the signs now and exposing this truth, diabolical agenda for what it is, the very best chance we have of stopping it. All right, so that's the end of the article. And I will go further with this and say that the end goal seems to be at the moment transhumanism. Okay, so they want to. If you think about the Handmaid's Tale, women are used as surrogates, the ones that are still fertile. But the ultimate dream, utopian ideal seems to be to move towards artificial wombs, and we're not quite there yet, although there does seem to be advances going on with that, and that idea is being planted within our culture and through people like Elon Musk and Bezos and other Silicon Valley tech types, Peter Thiel. They're all transhumanists and they're all obsessed with space travel, and that is linked in, right? When throughout all my time being involved in the men's rights movement and the manosphere stuff, just paying attention to it and knowing all the arguments and watching content creators and reading some of the thinkers' books, I have realized that there were a few, I call them bad actors, from the beginning who were transhumanists, or at least at worst are transhumanists, and at best are pragmatic to the idea of transhumanism and won't really fight it when it comes, which it is coming. It's here now already. Yeah. And the ultimate end goal of that, the conclusion, will be artificial wombs. And they can genetically modify humans. And I think that they'll try their best to get rid of gender. They'll just be androgynous drone types, the humans that survive. They won't be men and women. What's the point of having men and women if we can have artificial wombs? And I know some, as some people call, spiteful mutant MGTOW types who think this is a good idea because women are the limiting factor in reproduction, and if they can't handle their position seriously and are not moral and all this, and it's all their fault, you know, all the stuff against men and family unit, their weakness is used against them, right? And so we take away their reproductive capacity. I just can't believe that anyone who is pro-humanity and has any compassion for humanity, for what is good about humanity, thinks that artificial wombs are a good idea. I know a few people that will make these arguments to me that, people with fertility problems and all that. But I'm sorry, I don't really agree with that IVF is good. It's an idea anyway. I know someone that failed her IVF. She had frozen eggs, they failed, and then she got a donor egg and sperm implanted into her. And the whole thing freaked me out. I just kept thinking, "Whoa," you know, it made me shudder. And there are some very coherent, intelligent arguments that one can make, and I'm not going to make them now exactly. But I just think about how a child bonds with the mother in the womb, and you take that away from the child and the mother and put them in an artificial womb. What that could do, what element of humanity will be removed from that child? I just, I, I get very disturbed when I think about it, the possibilities of it. And also, even if there was a good argument to be made in its favor, it's not going the way it's happening. It's not going to be done in the people's favor, in the average human, the masses, the plebs, the proletariat, whatever. It's not going to be done in our favor. And this is what I may have argued with some MGTOW types, some radical MGTOW types who's going on about this. And I've said to them, you are seen as just either a worker bee or like a useless eater by the elites, and they're not going to let you have a baby via an artificial womb. You will have to sign up to all kinds of things that you probably don't want to get to have this become part of the elite class somehow. If you just want to be a box standard dude, average man, they're not going to give it to you. You're not going to get it. You're not going to get that privilege. And so they're being dangled a carrot, and they don't know what the stick is. They're not quite sure. Well, then they haven't thought about it yet. And there are some who've been around a very long time, early 2000s on the internet at least, who, one of them, I'm not going to mention his name, he said, if it weren't for those darn feminists, then we'd be on Mars by now. Really? Do you really think that? First of all, like he's clearly pro colonizing Mars, like Elon Musk and Bezos is, and I think that he's deluded. Personally, I don't think it's ever going to happen, but or that it should happen, to be honest. But this idea that maybe he was against feminism because he's inherently a transhumanist, pro space travel colonizer guy, because if you are into this whole space fantasy thing, you need to accept that humans need to be transformed and transhumanized to do it. We can't just continue as we are and then go and live in space somewhere. We'd have to be changed. We'd have to be augmented. We won't survive. And I was talking to some of my friends ages ago about the comic Dan Dare. It was promoted to young boys, 70s, 80s, or whatever it was. And he had this feminine companion where he went around doing space adventures and space travel. And I just kept thinking, why would the feminine companion be up for that? After a while, she'd be like, hang on a minute, can we not get married and have kids? Can we not settle down and just live life together and not go gallivanting on space? Is she really going to want to have a baby in space? Probably not. So can you see that if the plan is to say, right, we're going to colonize Mars, it's probably going to be easier with a bunch of trans men and women, especially women, because in the trans movement, it's higher percentage of young girls trying to become boys than it is the other way around. Even though people seem to be more disturbed about the other way around, or at least the TERFs are anyway, and they probably would be more up for it than a biological woman. Just so if you accept as well that they dramatically reducing the population, and then they want to eugenically augment everyone else that's left, like, I sad to say it, but as much as I love masculinity in men, I can recognize that they do seem to have a pragmatic tendency to them. At least with women's emotionality, sometimes that emotionality, when it's on the right cause, can be extremely powerful as an influence on her, the way she lives her life. Like, for example, with the anti-lockdown movement, there were more women involved. They felt very strongly against certain things to do with their children. And at least in the UK, I noticed the trend that there were more women. Not overtly, maybe like 60-40 or 55 or something. But there did seem to be quite a feminine response, a motherly response. And a lot of men were like, oh, there seemed to be a lot of men who said, well, I have to provide for my family, so I will take the jibby jab. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Right? Now, I could admire the wanting to provide for their family and be responsible, but at the same time, they're going along with it because they are sacrificing themselves. But it's like a positive trait of men is being used against them to be pro the system. And this has kind of happened to men for a very long time. And I have said when I was involved in the men's rights stuff over and over again that men and other people, that men have let the system, let the liberalism, let the ideals of the Enlightenment, that we should be progress, and capitalism is great and blah, 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 that's used against them. Because there's elements of that are very attractive to them because they are trying to look after their family and other people as well as themselves. But it's used against them. And so their pragmatism is used against them. And really, when they stop doing that and they stop going along with it, that is the big threat that the elites don't want, right? Women, like, they don't worry about women that much compared to men, which is why we've had this attack in the first place. So this is why this idea that women have all this influence on the government don't make much sense, because the government's kind of like, or at least those who sponsor the government, the elites are just like, well, yeah, you know, there's a woman over there protesting or whatever. We'll just throw them a bone of this and that. They do a similar thing to women, but they really don't feel that threatened by women compared to men. They really don't. And so this is why the gynocentrism stuff, when it's used to that you know, feminism has so much power of the average woman wielded, doesn't make that much sense to me. And there's some people who've written some thinking that I'm not going to detail right now, but they really can't see the wood through the trees when it comes to this, and I'm so glad that I finally can see the light about it all now. Anyway, this has gone on long enough. So my conclusion and summary really is that I believe that Marie is correct overall. There's a few things I disagree with, but that we are heading to a Handmaid's style social movement, and I don't know exactly how it will look, but I know that the trans women are going to be utilized within it, and that feminism is suddenly going to become more pro-conservative values somehow, domestic feminism, and that this transactional nature of relationships is already here. We've got OnlyFans, we've got other transactional models that people are just more adhering to these days. Romance is dead, right? Sort of. And just the fact that the men's rights movement is the root of it is inherently still kind of liberal and pro-enlightenment values, and therefore either there has been some pro-transhumanist dudes who are bad actors, and I could talk about that another time. But there's also just those who because they don't critique that as well as they should or as deep as they should. They kind of accept that this progress is a good idea, but it just needs to be done in a certain way that values men. And it's like, imagine thinking it would value anyone. So I'm going to end there, and I hope this hasn't been a too inconsistent and a rant that people can't really follow. Yeah, just make a comment if you want. Take care. God bless. Bye. Oh, how do I? Stop it.